One of you killed my husband, Titania cried, rising to her feet with clenched fist. Who is responsible? Who has blood on his hands? Will no one come forward? And I'll avenge my beloved by killing you all. The queen's body underwent a terrifying metamorphosis. Her already pale complexion turned bone white. Tall black veins curled in all directions just underneath her skin, weaving along her arms, legs, and head. Her hands grew to 3 times their normal size, and long, jagged nails, several feet in length, shot out of the fingertips. Her hair blazed with actual flames, and long blue cables of electric energy crackled and popped in the air in front of her eyes. Her wings sprang out of her back and flapped so hard they seemed to shake the room. She rose above the crowd, opened her mouth, and sprayed the room with a fiery liquid. Anything it touched was quickly engulfed in flames and reduced to cinders. Ever After shrieked and stampeded toward the door, knocking the smallest in the crowd to the ground. Mr. Kenneth snatched the girls up, tucking them under his arms like footballs, and ran. "We have to get out of here," Rhoda shouted as she was shoved aside by Tony Fats and Bobby Screwball, who plowed through the crowd, desperate to escape Titania's wrath. "Wait," Hampstead called to the old woman, turning and rushing back toward the queen. "Honest, are you crazy?" Granny Rhoda called after him, but he didn't stop. From Mr. Kenneth's grasp, Sabrina looked back to see the portly man run to the side of the blonde singer who he had sat next to at dinner. Bess had been knocked to the ground and was cowering before Titania's murderous gaze. Her boyfriend, Tony Fats, had left her to die. "No!" Hampstead cried as he grabbed a heavy chair and used it to fend off Titania. The queen shrieked and ignited the chair with her fiery breath. If Hampstead was afraid, he didn't show it. He tossed the flaming chair to the queen and then turned to help Bess to her feet. Together they raced out of the room just behind Kenneth and the grooms. When the group reached the main room, they paused, and Hampstead asked Bess, "Are you okay, ma'am?" "Ma'am is a name for old ladies," she said as she tried to catch her breath. "You can call me Bess, cowboy." Hampstead blushed. "We need to keep moving," Mr. Kenneth said. "We can't leave without Puck," Daphne cried. Mr. Kenneth snarled and set the girls down. "Hampstead, take Mrs. Grimm and the girls to safety. I'll join you once I find the boy." "I'm coming with you," Sabrina said. Kenneth shook his head. "It's my fault Puck got hurt in the first place. He's my responsibility," Sabrina said, hoping that the man could see she wasn't asking for his permission. "Stay close," he said, shoving back through the crowd. Sabrina followed at his heels, struggling against a tide of panicked ever-afters. She craned her neck in hopes of spotting Cobweb, the fairy who was tending to Puck, but he was nowhere in sight. He and Puck had to be in one of the rooms that lined the back hall. Kenneth cleared a path through the main room to the hallway. "Maybe Puck's in there," Sabrina shouted to Kenneth over the melee, pointing to the first closed door. She rushed over and turned the knob, but was locked tight. Kenneth turned the knob himself. It fell off in his powerful hand, and he pushed the door open. It was a broom closet filled with mops and bottles. Sabrina rushed across the hall to another door, also locked. Again, Kenneth crushed the knob. They found Moth pacing a room in which sat what looked like a giant eggplant. It had deep purple skin with green veins running through it. Next to it was a small table covered in potions and powder. When she saw them, the fairy girl ran to the eggplant as if to protect it. "How dare you invade my room?" she cried. "Where's Puck? We have to get out of here," Sabrina said. Kenneth closed the door behind them. "Titania has gone crazy. She's trying to kill everyone. Titania won't hurt me." Mr. Kenneth let out a loud growl. "Because I'll get to you first," he barked. "Where's the boy?" The little girl's eyes grew wide with fear, and she gestured at the eggplant. "He's right there." "That's Puck," Sabrina said incredulously. "He's in a cocoon stage as his wings heal," Moth explained. Just then, something heavy slammed against the door, nearly knocking it off its hinges. "She's coming," Mr. Kenneth said. "How are we going to get out of here?" Sabrina cried. Mr. Kenneth searched the room for other exits, but found none. He turned to Sabrina, and for a moment she thought she saw worry in his face. Then his body grew in size. His face seemed more wolf-like, as if he was somewhere between the old man she knew and the wolf she feared. He stepped over to the far wall and pounded it with his enormous hand. It crumbled and a small hole appeared. He smashed the wall again, this time making the hole big enough to step through. "Girls, come with me," he growled, and though Sabrina was afraid of his appearance, she was more afraid of the monster trying to get into the room. She raced over to the cocoon and snatched it in her arms. It was surprisingly light and had a horrible smell like moldy pickles. "Who are you ever after?" Moth shouted at Candace. "He's the big bad wolf," Sabrina explained. "The murderer?" the fairy ghost shrieked. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Just then, the door to the room blew off its hinges. Titania appeared in the doorway, her mighty wings vibrating the air. She roared like a lion and shot a stream of fire right at them. "Suit yourself," Sabrina said, tightening her grip on the cocoon. She turned and ran through the opening in the wall with Mr. Kenneth following close behind. Moments later, Moth came flying frantically after them, her pink insect-like wings keeping her aloft. They were back in the park, where Daphne had first told the knock-knock joke that had revealed the golden egg. The restaurant had disappeared again. Sabrina had left her coat inside, and now she was freezing. She hurried alongside Candace, doing her best not to fall in the slippery snow, but it wasn't easy. She turned her ankle and almost lost her hold on the puck's cocoon. Moth landed in front of her and snatched the cocoon out of Sabrina's hands. "You have no right to touch His Majesty's healing vessel," she said indignantly. "Fine, keep the stinky thing," Sabrina said as she scanned the area. Where could they hide? Suddenly, Titania appeared behind them. As if out of thin air, she soared overhead, preparing to strike. Mr. Kenneth rushed over to one of the lamps that lined the park paths and pulled it out of its concrete mooring. There were several loud pops as the electrical wires inside were ripped apart. Kenneth swung the lamp like a bat right at the queen and hit her hard. She was hurled into the pavement with enough impact to create a smoking crater. Kenneth stood over the hole, waiting for Titania to crawl out. Granny, Daphne, Hamster, and his new friend Bess appeared nearby and rushed to join Sabrina. Granny looked worried. "We should go," she said. "Haven't I been saying that all day?" Sabrina cried. No sooner were the words out of her mouth than Titania rose out of the crater and screamed like a banshee. "Any suggestions?" Kenneth asked. Sabrina turned to Moth. "What should we do? She's going to kill us all." "She won't kill me," the fairy said. "I'm a princess." Sabrina scowled. If they survived, she needed to remember to introduce Moth to her fist. Just then, Mustard Seed and his fairies appeared in the sky and surrounded Titania. They threw long, thick ropes around the queen, binding her as she fought and screamed. Mustard Seed's men dragged her toward the spot where the golden egg had been and disappeared once again into the invisible restaurant. Mustard Seed landed next to Granny. "You must leave here," he said. "I will take my brother." "Forget it," Sabrina said. "Puck stays with us." "I'm not arguing with you, child," Mustard Seed said angrily. "Then don't. I'm not letting him anywhere near your mother," Sabrina said. "I'm confused," Granny said to Sabrina. "You're talking as if Puck is with us." "He is," Sabrina said, pointing at the cocoon Moth was holding. "This is Puck," Daphne said, placing her hand on the cocoon's skin. A sticky trail of goo clung to her fingers when she pulled it off. "Oh yeah, this is Puck, all right." "Mustard Seed, as Puck's fiancé, I will look after the crown prince," Moth said. "Fiancé?" everyone cried. Mustard Seed thought about this for a long moment, seeming to weigh his options, then nodded reluctantly. "You may take him," he said to Granny, "if you take Moth too, and keep them both safe. But do not take Puck from the city." "Sorry, buddy, we're out of here now," Sabrina cried. "Do not leave the city," Mustard Seed roared. Granny rode and nodded. "We'll stay." The fairy looked relieved. "I must go to my mother," he said, and he turned and flew back toward the restaurant, disappearing in a blink. Granny took the opportunity to usher everyone out of the park. When they were several blocks away, she stopped to catch her breath. We should go back to the car and drive away from here as soon as possible, Sabrina said, shivering. We have parked. There's no reason to stay. If we stick around, someone's going to get hurt. Mr. Kenneth removed his suit jacket and wrapped it around Sabrina to keep her warm. Daphne, who was also without a coat, squirmed inside too, wrapping her arms around her sister. I agree with the girl, Kenneth said. We can't go. This is a mystery, Daphne said. They might need our help solving it. Another good reason to leave, Sabrina said. Daphne's right, Granny said. We'll check into a hotel. We all saw the mark on Oberon's chest. The scarlet hand is behind his mother. Before Sabrina could argue, Tony Fats buzzed the group and landed next to Bess. I'm glad you got out okay, Bess, he said. No thanks to you, she replied. Then she sighed, turned to Mr. Hampstead, leaned in close, and kissed him on the cheek. Thanks, cowboy, she said. What do they call you? My name's Ernest, Hampstead said as he turned pink. Tony Fats grumbled, snatched his girlfriend by the wrist, and dragged her back down the street as Hampstead looked on wistfully. Granny raised her hand and a taxi pulled over. We need to find a hotel with a parking lot for a car, she said to the driver. He shook his head and told them if they had a car to leave it where it was. Parking is insane, lady, he explained. Granny shrugged and helped Sabrina, Daphne, Moth, and Puck's Cocoon into the back of the cab, then climbed into the front passenger seat. She rolled down the window and said to Mr. Kenneth and Hampstead, Can you two find your own cab? Rhoda, I believe I'll walk, Kenneth replied. He looked shaken and out of sorts. The winter air will help my condition. I can follow your scent. I'll go with him, Hampstead said. I'd like to see as much of the city as I can before we have to head back. I'll see you at breakfast. Granny nodded. Take care. She rolled up her window and the cab pulled away. Is that the thing that's stinking up my cab? The driver asked, looking at the purple orb in his rearview mirror. It's a school project, Sabrina lied. Science fair stuff. What's a project? How quickly can you make a full-grown man lose his lunch? Hey, it's no Rose Garden back here either, Sabrina said. You ever clean this cab? The driver grumbled and turned his attention back to the road. Soon, the cab pulled up outside the Fitzpatrick Manhattan Hotel, and the woman clambered out. The hotel was a tall, old-fashioned building with an emerald green awning. The smell of tobacco drifted from inside. A doorman invited them into the warm lobby where several tourists sat in front of a crackling fireplace, looking out the window at the falling snow. My goodness, one of the tourists cried as she pinched her nose. I think the sewers are backing up. Ugh, it smells like someone died, another complained. Granny ignored the reaction to the cocoon and approached the front desk, who requested 3 rooms and asked that sets of keys be left for Mr. Hampstead and Mr. Gannis. A bellhop looked at the family with an odd expression when he was told they had no luggage. He took them up to their room on the 4th floor. Inside, they found 2 queen-sized beds, a bathroom with a marble tub, and a pamphlet on the sights and sounds of the Big Apple. This is unacceptable, Moth said before they had even turned the lights on. I am royalty and accustomed to refinements. We need to find a more suitable room for the prince, and one that is private. Sabrina rolled her eyes and flipped on the light switch. Hello, Mrs. Grimm, a voice said from across the room. The women let out a shriek and nearly fell over themselves. There, sitting in a chair by the window, was Mustard Seed. Oz stood behind the fairy prince. I hope that none of you was harmed this evening, Mr. Seed said. I'm sure you can understand that my mother's actions were due to stress and heartbreak. Well, she nearly flame broiled us back there, Sabrina cried. Yeah, she's a jerkazoid, Daphne added. Oz stepped forward, but she was the only one of us who was thinking clearly at the time. That seems to be the end of this video. I'll send more later. Goodbye.